The Clone Wars transformed the galaxy into a constant battlefield, where each victory seemed only to postpone the next catastrophe. Anakin Skywalker fought on countless fronts, leading the clone troops with the precision of a Jedi Master, but his mind frequently wandered to Coruscant, where Padme Amidala awaited him. The secret meetings between the two became even rarer, stolen between missions and Senate sessions, precious moments that both treasured like jewels amid the chaos. No one suspected the clandestine marriage they had sealed years before on Naboo, a union forbidden by the Jedi Code that Anakin had sworn to follow. The war demanded sacrifices, but the love they shared seemed to grow stronger with each separation, defying all the rules that tried to keep them apart. Ahsoka Tano, Anakin's Padawan, noticed her master's occasional distraction, but attributed it to the weight of command and the responsibilities he carried on his shoulders. When Padme discovered the pregnancy, fear settled in her heart like never before. She knew that revealing the truth would mean the end of Anakin's career as a Jedi, perhaps even his expulsion from the Order, and this at a crucial moment for the Republic. Morning sickness was disguised as political indispositions, and her personal doctor was instructed to maintain absolute secrecy about her condition. Anakin, when he finally learned the news during a quick visit to Coruscant, experienced an overwhelming mixture of joy and terror that almost paralyzed him. He held Padme's hands, looking deeply into her brown eyes, and promised that he would find a way to protect his family without abandoning his duties. The following months were a delicate dance between necessary lies and hidden truths, with Padme wearing increasingly elaborate dresses to hide her growing belly. Anakin returned from battles whenever possible, stealing precious moments to feel the baby's kick against the palm of his hand. The birth happened in a discreet medical center in Coruscant, far from the curious eyes of the Senate and the Jedi Order. Padme gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl that she immediately named Luke and Leia, feeling that these names carried hope for the future. Anakin was on a mission when he received the coded message, and his joy was so intense that Ahsoka immediately noticed that something extraordinary had happened to her master. He invented some excuse about a strategic victory and rushed back to Coruscant, where he held his children for the first time, tears flowing freely down his face marked by the scars of war. The babies were perfect, small and fragile, and Anakin felt a love so deep that it surpassed everything he had ever experienced, even his devotion to the Force. Padme watched her husband cradle the children, knowing that this moment of peace would be all too brief in a universe torn apart by conflict. Ahsoka Tano discovered the truth by accident, when she went looking for Anakin to discuss an urgent mission and found him, through the tracker, in Padme's apartment. She stood frozen at the entrance, watching her master hold two babies while talking softly with the senator, and the reality of the situation hit her like a lightsaber blow. Anakin froze upon seeing his Padawan, his blue eyes wide with panic, and for a long moment no one said anything, the heavy silence between them loaded with unimaginable consequences. Ahsoka could report him to the council, could destroy everything he had built, but when she looked at the innocent babies, something in her heart softened. She entered the apartment, closed the door behind her, and said she would keep their secret, no matter the cost. Anakin tried to explain, the words stumbling over each other in his haste, but Ahsoka raised her hand to silence him, saying she understood more than he imagined about choosing between duty and heart. From that day on, she became an active accomplice in protecting Anakin's secret family, helping to create cover stories and diverting attention whenever necessary. The following months were a torrent of carefully constructed lies and growing paranoia. Ahsoka visited the apartment when she could, marveling at Luke and Leia's growth, playing with them and helping Padme when Anakin was absent on the battlefronts. The young woman discovered she had a natural talent for caring for children, and the twins seemed to adore her colorful montrals and vibrant energy. But the fragile peace was shattered when Ahsoka was falsely accused of bombing the Jedi Temple, a crime she did not commit, but that everyone seemed ready to believe she had perpetrated. Anakin fought desperately to prove her innocence, investigating on his own while the council prepared to expel her from the Order. When he finally discovered the true culprit and cleared Ahsoka's name, he expected everything would return to normal. But his Padawan was different, wounded by the betrayal of an institution that should have protected her. She announced to the council that she was leaving the Jedi Order, not because of guilt, but by choice, and Anakin felt his world crumble once again. It was in that moment of absolute despair, seeing Ahsoka descend the temple steps and walk away from the only life she had known, that Anakin made the most reckless decision of his existence. He marched to the council chamber, where the masters were still discussing recent events, and demanded to be heard with an intensity that made several members recoil in their chairs. Mace Windu granted him the floor, and Anakin, with a trembling but firm voice, revealed everything. His secret marriage to Padme, the birth of the twins, and how Ahsoka had kept the secret to protect him. The silence that followed was absolute, each master processing the confession they had just heard, the magnitude of the code breaking that Anakin had admitted without reservation. Yoda closed his eyes, the ancient pain in his expression revealing that perhaps he had already suspected something, and said, "Great are your transgressions, young Skywalker. The code, broken it was, and consequences there must be." Mace Windu formally declared that Anakin was expelled from the Jedi Order, effective immediately, and that he should surrender his lightsaber and leave the temple before nightfall. Anakin nodded, a strange calm taking hold of him now that the truth was finally revealed, and walked out of the chamber like a man free from lies, but chained by the consequences of his choices. Padme held Anakin's hands that night, while the twins slept peacefully in their cribs, and suggested something he had never imagined hearing. She spoke about Naboo, about the green fields and crystalline lakes where they had married in secret, about a life far from the political intrigues of Coruscant and the shadows of war. Anakin at first resisted, arguing that abandoning the capital would mean leaving the galaxy to its own fate. But when he looked at Luke and Leia, something inside him changed completely. Fatherhood had transformed his priorities in ways he had never anticipated, revealing a protective side that surpassed even his desire to be the most powerful Jedi in history. He realized that his children deserved to grow up in peace, far from the constant dangers that lurked around every corner of Coruscant, and that Padme deserved to live without the perpetual fear that their secret would be discovered. After long nighttime conversations and many tears, both of joy and relief, they made the decision to leave for Naboo and build a new life. Ahsoka, when she learned of the plans, immediately asked to accompany them, declaring that she still considered Anakin her master, regardless of what the Jedi Council said. The move to Naboo was like awakening from a prolonged nightmare and discovering that peace still existed somewhere in the galaxy. They settled in a village on the shores of Lake Country, in a modest but comfortable house that offered views of the tranquil waters and distant mountains. Anakin discovered simple pleasures that the life of a Jedi had never allowed him to know. Waking up without the urgent call to a mission, having breakfast with his family, teaching Luke to take his first stumbling steps while Leia watched with curious eyes. Padme flourished away from the pressures of the Senate, her natural beauty enhanced by the genuine happiness that radiated as she cared for the children and her husband. Ahsoka continued training daily with Anakin, the two practicing combat forms in the foggy mornings while the twins still slept, keeping their skills sharp even in times of peace. The young Togruta became an integral part of the family, an older sister to the children and a close confidant to Padme when Anakin was absorbed in his own thoughts. Life on Naboo was everything Anakin had ever dreamed of, an existence he could barely believe was real after so many years of conflict and secrets. Obi-Wan Kenobi discovered their whereabouts a few months after the move, but instead of censure, he brought only friendship and understanding. He began visiting them regularly, always bringing gifts for the twins and stories from the Clone Wars that still ravaged the distant galaxy. The conversations between the two former partners flowed as they had always flowed, perhaps even better now that there were no more secrets between them, and their friendship strengthened in ways Anakin had not imagined possible. Obi-Wan held Luke in his arms, marveled by the latent strength he could already sense in the boy, and played with Leia, who pulled his beard with crystalline laughter. Padme prepared elaborate meals when Obi-Wan visited, and the 5 adults shared stories around the table while the children played on the nearby floor. During one of these visits, Obi-Wan casually mentioned that he was thinking of suggesting to the Council that Anakin participate in some specific missions, those that required his unique expertise and that could help shorten the war. He spoke about how the galaxy still needed the Chosen One, even if the Jedi Order no longer recognized him as one of their own. Anakin listened to Obi-Wan's proposal attentively, seriously considering his former master's words while watching Luke try to stack wooden blocks. He thanked him for the trust and consideration, touched that Obi-Wan still believed in him after everything that had happened, but his answer was clear and unwavering. He did not want to return to the war, did not want to leave his family again to fight battles that seemed to have no end in sight, not when he had finally found something worth living for. Anakin explained that his priority now was Luke and Leia, ensuring they grew up safe and loved, that they had a present father in their lives instead of a distant figure who appeared between missions. Obi-Wan nodded with understanding, placing a hand on Anakin's shoulder and saying he completely respected his decision, that perhaps the greatest battle anyone could fight was the battle to protect those they loved. Padme, who had heard the entire conversation from the kitchen, felt a wave of love and gratitude for Anakin, for him having chosen family above everything else, including his own pride and sense of galactic duty. Ahsoka smiled, seeing the expression of peace on her master's face, recognizing that he had finally found his true purpose. The months transformed into a blessed routine of normalcy that Anakin sometimes had to pinch himself to believe was real. He taught Ahsoka advanced lightsaber techniques, sharing knowledge that would normally be reserved only for Jedi Knights, and she absorbed everything with the fierce dedication that had always characterized her. Luke and Leia grew rapidly, their distinct personalities beginning to emerge. Luke was contemplative and gentle, while Leia demonstrated a stubbornness and determination that reminded them of both Anakin and Padme. Anakin spent hours playing with the twins, building simple mechanical toys that fascinated them, telling edited stories of his adventures as a Jedi that made them widen their eyes in admiration. Padme observed these interactions with a full heart, knowing she had made the right decision in taking them from Coruscant, in giving her children the chance for a true childhood. Obi-Wan's visits continued, becoming one of the highlights of their quiet lives, a reminder that they still had connections to the larger world beyond their peaceful bubble. Everything seemed perfect, too blessed to last, and Anakin sometimes woke in the middle of the night with a dark foreboding he could not name. The nightmare that Anakin feared materialized on an ordinary morning that began like all the others on Naboo. Padme had taken Luke and Leia for a walk through the village gardens, taking advantage of the pleasant weather and wanting to give Anakin and Ahsoka time to train without distractions. Anakin was in the middle of a meditation exercise when he felt a violent disturbance in the Force, a silent scream that echoed through his connection with Padme and made his blood freeze in his veins. He and Ahsoka ran to the village, lightsabers already ignited, but found only chaos and terrified witnesses who spoke of unidentified ships and hooded figures. Padme's guards were all down, some clearly struck by lightsabers, and there was no sign of her or the children anywhere. Anakin fell to his knees at the spot where Padme had last been seen, his hands touching the ground as if he could sense some trace of her, and when he raised his eyes to Ahsoka, she saw a fury and despair she had never witnessed before. A holographic message was found shortly after, transmitted directly to Anakin, showing the sinister figure of Count Dooku holding a dagger too close to Padme, while Luke and Leia cried in the background. The Count's voice was cold and calculating when he declared that he had something that belonged to Anakin, and that if he wanted to see his family alive again, he should follow very specific instructions that would be sent soon. Anakin did not wait for the instructions that Dooku had promised to send, his mind already tracing rescue plans while the holographic message still echoed in the air. He contacted Obi-Wan immediately, his voice loaded with urgency that made his former master leave everything behind and depart for Naboo without hesitation. Ahsoka prepared the ships while Anakin scoured the kidnapping scene, using the Force to capture any vestige that indicated where Dooku had taken his family. Fragments of conversations in the minds of terrified witnesses revealed images of a separatist ship departing toward the Outer Rim systems, enough to begin. Obi-Wan arrived hours later, finding Anakin in deep concentration, channeling rage and fear into crystalline focus, and together they began tracking Dooku across the galaxy. The pursuit led them through 3 systems before they located an abandoned separatist complex on a remote moon of Raxus. Anakin could feel Padme inside, her presence like a beacon calling to him, and he did not wait for elaborate plans. He descended from the ship with lightsaber ignited, Obi-Wan and Ahsoka following as they advanced through the complex destroying droids. Luke and Leia's cries echoed through the corridors, increasing with each step until they reached a wide chamber where Padme was chained, the twins in a nearby cage, and Dooku in the center with his curved saber already ignited. The Count smiled arrogantly, commenting on how attachment ruined the Jedi, but Anakin did not respond. Obi-Wan moved to free Padme, but Anakin declared that Dooku was his alone, and Ahsoka guided Obi-Wan to protect the family while the battle began. Anakin fought with a ferocity that transcended everything Dooku had ever faced, each blow loaded with paternal fury fueled by the dark side. The Count tried to use his Makashi elegance, but Anakin crushed his movements with raw power and impossible speed. Padme watched horrified as Obi-Wan freed her, running to get the twins while the battle intensified. Ahsoka recognized a darkness in Anakin that deeply frightened her, but remained ready to protect the family. The fight ended when Anakin disarmed Dooku by breaking his wrist, sending the curved saber flying across the chamber. The Count fell to his knees, genuine fear on his face, as Anakin lifted him by the throat using the Force. Anakin demanded to know who the Sith Lord was, the true master behind everything, and when Dooku resisted, he invaded his mind with brutality that tore screams of agony. Obi-Wan shouted to stop, but Anakin was beyond reach. Dooku finally broke, screaming a name that made everyone freeze. Palpatine, the Supreme Chancellor, was Darth Sidious. The plan had failed because Palpatine had underestimated Anakin's determination to protect his family at any cost, including forcefully extracting information from his pawn. Before Obi-Wan could suggest taking Dooku prisoner, Anakin ignited his saber and cut off the Count's head in a decisive movement, executing him summarily. Shocked silence took over the chamber as everyone processed what they had witnessed. Anakin deactivated his saber, turning to embrace Padme with tenderness that contrasted with the previous violence. She trembled between relief and horror. Luke and Leia clutched to her chest. Ahsoka questioned internally whether she still recognized her master, while Obi-Wan struggled to find words. When he finally asked what Anakin intended to do, the answer came firm and unwavering. He was going to Coruscant to confront Palpatine and end the one who had orchestrated all the suffering. Anakin asked Obi-Wan to take Padme and the children to a safe place, preferably Naboo under heavy protection, while he dealt with the Chancellor. The determination on his face left no room for arguments, and everyone understood that the confrontation with Palpatine would be inevitable. Anakin held Ahsoka's hands before departing, his intense blue eyes fixed on hers as he asked something he knew would be difficult. He needed her to stay on Naboo protecting Padme and the twins, to ensure that nothing would happen to his family while he dealt with Palpatine on Coruscant. Ahsoka wanted to protest, wanted to be at her master's side in that final battle, but saw the silent plea in his gaze and understood that this was the only way for Anakin to have peace of mind to do what needed to be done. She nodded slowly, promising that Luke and Leia would be safe, that she would give her life if necessary to protect them. Padme observed the farewell with a tight heart, knowing it could be the last time she would see Anakin, but when he embraced her and kissed her forehead, she forced a smile and said she would be waiting for his return. Obi-Wan placed a hand on Anakin's shoulder, saying he would stay on Naboo too, that his presence would help ensure the family was protected against any retaliation that Palpatine might try. Anakin thanked him with a nod, knowing that leaving Obi-Wan and Ahsoka together was the best defense he could offer his loved ones. The journey to Coruscant was the loneliest Anakin had ever experienced, each parsec bringing him closer to a destiny that seemed simultaneously inevitable and impossible. He meditated during the flight, not in the tranquil way the Jedi taught, but diving deeply into his emotions, accepting the rage he felt at Palpatine for using him as a pawn. The Chancellor's manipulations extended throughout his entire life since he arrived at the temple, each encouraging word about his potential, each conversation about the Council's failure to recognize his worth, all carefully calculated to mold him. Anakin thought of all the times Palpatine had offered advice that subtly undermined his trust in the Jedi, how he had encouraged his doubts and insecurities while presenting himself as his only true ally. The kidnapping of his family had been the final move, the attempt to transform him through despair, but Palpatine did not expect Anakin to make Dooku talk. When the ship emerged from hyperspace over Coruscant, Anakin was ready. his resolve absolute and implacable as tempered steel. Anakin landed in the Jedi Temple hangar, not at the Senate where Palpatine would expect to be confronted, knowing the Masters would be waiting. When the ramp descended, he found Mace Windu and Yoda waiting, their grave expressions revealing they had been alerted about his arrival and what Dooku had revealed. Mace Windu stepped forward, his posture rigid and voice firm when he asked if it was true that Palpatine was the Sith Lord they had been searching for years. Anakin confirmed without hesitation, his voice cold and determined when he declared he was going to kill him now, that there would be no more games or manipulations. Windu raised a hand, telling Anakin to wait, to let the Council deal with Palpatine since he was too emotionally involved to act with the necessary clarity. Anakin simply walked toward the hangar exit, passing Windu without saying a word, his body language making clear that nothing would stop him from completing his mission. Yoda struck his cane on the floor, his voice echoing with authority when he said that Palpatine should be judged by the Senate, that this was the path of justice that the Republic defended. Anakin stopped only for a moment, turning to look at the two Masters with an expression that mixed sadness and unwavering determination. He said calmly that he was not a Jedi, reminding them that the Council had expelled him, that he was no longer bound to the code or its procedures. Windu and Yoda exchanged a brief look, and both made the decision to follow him to the Chancellor's office, ready to intervene if necessary. They crossed the government district in tense silence, Anakin ahead with decided steps while the Jedi Masters tried to follow him. When they arrived at the Senate building, the Chancellor's Red Guard tried to block entry, but Anakin swept them away with a gesture of his hand using the Force, knocking down the elite soldiers as if they were toys. More guards appeared, their weapons energized, but Anakin defeated them systematically without even igniting his lightsaber, using only telekinesis to disarm them and throw them against the walls. Yoda observed with ancient and sad eyes, recognizing in Anakin a power he had long suspected existed, a force that when directed could bring down even the most powerful of the Sith. Anakin burst through the doors of the Chancellor's office with such force that they flew from their hinges, revealing Palpatine seated calmly behind his ornate desk. The old politician's smile did not waver upon seeing Anakin enter, his yellowed eyes gleaming with amusement as he commented that he expected this visit sooner or later. Palpatine rose slowly, abandoning any pretense of senile weakness, his voice changing to something deeper and more sinister when he revealed his true identity as Darth Sidious. He praised Anakin for making Dooku talk, admitting he had not foreseen that outcome, that his plan was simpler. Use the kidnapping to push Anakin to despair and rage, transform him into his new apprentice. Anakin ignited his lightsaber, the blue blade projecting dancing shadows on the luxurious walls, and declared that Palpatine would never have the chance to manipulate anyone else. The battle began explosively, Palpatine revealing a hidden lightsaber and attacking with speed that contradicted his frail appearance. Force lightning discharges illuminating the office while furniture was destroyed around them. When Windu and Yoda reached the destroyed door, seconds later, the fight was already in full swing, Anakin and Palpatine moving at speeds that could barely be followed. The Sith Lord laughed as he fought, taunting Anakin about how fear for his family made him predictable. But each word only fueled the former Jedi's determination. Mace Windu did not hesitate, igniting his purple saber and entering the battle alongside Anakin, recognizing that the Chosen One needed support against such a powerful Sith. Yoda remained at the entrance, ready to intervene but recognizing that this battle belonged to Anakin and Windu. Palpatine tried to use Force Lightning, but Anakin blocked it with his saber while Windu flanked with his Vapad style, channeling the darkness back against the Sith. The office was completely destroyed by the ferocity of the combat, windows shattering and walls cracking under the pressure of the Force being manipulated by three powerful users. The coordination between Anakin and Windu was surprising, two warriors with completely different styles complementing each other perfectly against the common enemy. Palpatine finally lost his lightsaber when Anakin used a bold maneuver that almost cost him an arm, but managed to disarm the Sith Lord in exchange. Palpatine's saber flew across the room, and the old Sith retreated, his hands raised in apparent surrender while lightning crackled between his fingers. Yoda struck his cane on the floor, his voice echoing when he said, "Calm, young Skywalker. Arrest him we must." Judged by the Senate, he must be. The path of justice, this is. Anakin looked at Palpatine, seeing in the yellowed eyes of the man decades of manipulation and death, thinking of all who had suffered because of his power games. Without hesitation, he cut off Palpatine's head in a clean and decisive movement, the Sith's surprised expression frozen eternally on his face. The body collapsed, and absolute silence took over the destroyed office as everyone processed what had just happened. The death of the most powerful man in the galaxy. Yoda briefly closed his eyes, processing what he had witnessed, but it was Mace Windu who broke the silence first. The Jedi Master examined Palpatine's body and said calmly that Anakin was right, that the Chancellor was too dangerous to be left alive, that he had the entire Senate in his hands and unimaginable resources he could have used to escape any trial. Windu acknowledged that, although it was not the traditional Jedi way, it was the only real solution for such a powerful and manipulative enemy. Yoda approached slowly, leaning on his cane, and looked at Anakin with an ancient and wise expression. The small master said, "Fulfilled the prophecy is. Balance to the Force brought you have, young Skywalker. Destroyed the Sith is." The words echoed in the silence, carrying weight of centuries of waiting and expectation. Mace Windu formally declared that, given the extraordinary circumstances and the fulfillment of the Chosen One's prophecy, the Council should reconsider Anakin's expulsion from the Order. Intense discussions followed in the subsequent days, with the Council debating not only Anakin's return, but how to present Palpatine's death to the galaxy. Eventually, recognizing that he had done what no other Jedi had accomplished in 1,000 years, destroying the Sith and freeing the Republic from dark manipulation, the Council voted unanimously to restore Anakin Skywalker to the Jedi Order, not as a knight but as a master, also granting him a seat on the Council he had so desired years before.